Alrighty, so once again, we're going to have a full slate of action where there's going to be 14 games that are going to be happening this weekend in match week number 21. But unfortunately, this is kind of a match week that me and a lot of MLS fans don't really like to see, where all these games are pretty much crunched in a time frame between 7:30 p.m. Eastern all the way to midnight 30 p.m. Eastern time. And it's very similar to what we saw in the middle of the week, where all these games are taking place at night game. There's no early Saturday game. There's no early Sunday game as well. And while it is a little bit spread out in terms of some of these games, and that we won't have a situation where there's going to be like 11 games that's going to happen at the same time, there will be a case where there's going to be, I think, at 1.9 games that's going to be happening at the same time, which means it'll definitely be ground hopping this Saturday. So let us begin with the first one, which is FC Cincinnati versus the New England Revolution. So yeah, for Cincinnati, of course, they're still chasing Inter Miami for that top spot, and theoretically, this is a matchup that you would think that Cincinnati should easily win against New England, but New England really, they have kind of gone for a bit of a renaissance, at least in the last couple of games. And I mentioned ever since the chaos that has happened off the field and the toxicity that's going off the field, this team has actually done relatively well, to a point where, yes, they are still dead last in the standings, but they're actually not that far away from the playoff standing. They're only 4 points behind. In fact, all the teams that near the bottom of the standings are very tightly bunch up together in terms of that final playoff position. So that should be very interesting. The next couple of weeks of the different shuffle position we're going to see near the bottom of the standings to chase for the playoff spot. But this, of course, is the first of 6 games that's starting at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. New England actually has the all-time record with a 5-3-2 record over Cincinnati. But the last time both of these teams play against each other, Cincinnati did get their second win all time. They got a 2-1 road win against New England before it was 2-2 draw between both of these teams, a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, another 2-2 draw, and then New England winning 3-2 on the road against Cincinnati. So again, this feels like it's a game that Cincinnati is heavy favorites, but I would not be surprised if we could see an upset in this game. Again, the Revs, they have definitely played very well in the last couple of games, but this will definitely be their toughest test in this one, to see that whether or not, if New England maybe started to look like them old self and look like a team that we were expected them to be, which is a team that should be competing for playoffs and not at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, as they're still sitting right there. Next up, we got the other Ohio team, and they're playing against another team that's kind of like near the bottom of the standing. That is the Columbus Crew versus Sporting KC. Now, unfortunately, for at least in terms of Sporting KC side, or actually, I would say fortunately for Columbus, unlike where Cincinnati might face against a little resurgent team like New England, you can't say the same thing about Sporting KC. It's been a bit of a miserable season for them. 3-5-11 is the record, whereas Columbus, they did lose in their last game against Inter Miami, but keep in mind, they're finally back home at Lower.com Field. I'm pretty sure Wilfred Nancy's side will be very happy the fact that they're finally back home for the first time in 5 games. But their record is 7-6-3, and in terms of all-time meaning, Sporting KC actually has all-time meaning over Columbus. 26-10-23 is the all-time meaning. Last time both of these teams played against each other, it was a 0-0 draw. For it was Sporting KC winning 1-0 on the road against Columbus. Then it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams, a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and Sporting KC is able to win 3-2 against Columbus. So Columbus has not been able to figure out Sporting KC, at least in these last 5 head-to-head matchup. Well, that of course finally happened in this game. Most likely, because again, this is a Columbus team that I'm pretty sure Wilfred Nancy side would definitely wants to bounce back after a bit of a speed bump that they suffer in the hand of Inter Miami in the middle of the week, and not to mention facing against a Sporting KC side that, yeah, it seems like they're basically waving the white flag, and we're already starting to see that there are some team in the West, especially near the bottom of the West, that are probably already starting to wave the white flag and maybe are already out of the playoff picture. Now, moving on, we got DC versus the Houston Dynamo. So, in terms of the all-time meaning, 16-6-7 in favor of DC. So the Dynamo has a really good record against DC United, and it seems like this could be a game where that all-time record could reflect in terms of these two teams facing against each other, because the Dynamo, they have a 6-6-6 record. They're kind of a little bit mediocre, and they're facing against a DC team that, yeah, they've been going for a very rough patch in these last month or so. 4-7-8 record. In the last five head-to-head matchup, it was a 2-0 DC win against Houston. Then Houston won 2-1 on the road against DC. Then it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams. Then Houston won 3-1 on the road against DC. And then it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams. I would also like to say that this is the Ben Olsen derby because, yeah, Ben Olsen, I think this is the first time that he's going to be returning to his former club DC, and I wonder whether or not DC will maybe create some sort of welcome back to him. I mean, I know obviously DC fans will still hate what Ben Olsen done to their team, especially near the end of the tenure of that decade-long tenure that he has with DC. But he's been with the club for a very long time, and I feel like they should at least kind of give him a warm welcome back, or maybe they'll just kind of boo him because they're probably frustrated the fact that, yeah, where has this been in terms of him doing an amazing job with the Houston Dynamo compared to all those years, especially the last couple of years where DC just looked like a very boring team under Ben Olsen. Now, moving on, we got the New York Red Bulls versus Toronto FC. So I would say that this maybe could be a bit of a desperation derby, even though both of these teams are in the playoff position. In fact, I could say that there's a lot of games this week. I could easily say it's a desperation derby because for the Red Bulls, yeah, these last two games, it has to be very frustrating. They could have easily won these last two games instead of getting 2 points. They have an 8-7-4 record, while for TFC, yeah, those growing pains that they've been suffering through this season has really shown in the last couple of games, losing to a couple of teams and is near the bottom of the standings, and now their record is at 7-3-9. But in terms of the all-time meeting, 22-10-10 in favor of the Red Bulls. Last five head-to-head matchup was a 3-0 win that the Red Bulls had against Toronto. Then it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams before the Red Bulls won 2-0 against Toronto. Then Toronto won 1-0. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. The Red Bulls won 4-1 against TFC. I almost thought that was a 0 there on the Red Bulls. Pretty embarrassing, the fact that I can't even read my own handwriting. And then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. So yeah, again, you could say it's a desperation derby because both of these teams need to want to get a win after a bit of a rough patch that they've gone through in the last couple of games, and we'll see who can, of course, do so. You would think that the Red Bulls would do so, but again, it's pretty clear that they're really missing some of their most high end attacking talent like Lewis Morgan and Emo Frostberg. Their absence has definitely been felt because this attack kind of looks similar to last season's attack, which is a team that they just don't have that X factor and that clinical finisher to really put away those chances to win games like they've done throughout this season. Now, moving on, we got Orlando City versus the Chicago Fire. So you could also say this is a desperation derby, although you could also argue it maybe is not because the Chicago Fire is going with their usual narrative of usually when the summer happened, that's when they're starting to heat up, and they have another chance to get a road win in this one against an Orlando City side that has just been miserable this season at home. They still only won one game so far this season at home at Interco Stadium, which is by far, well, actually they're tied, I think, with the Quakes with the worst home record in MLS this season. Orlando with a 4-6-8 record, while Chicago also a 4-6-8 record. And in terms of the all-time meeting, it's all balanced at 7 wins, 7 draw, and 7 loss apiece. So cue the Thanos quote. Perfectly balanced as things shall be in terms of this matchup. The last five head-to-head matchup, it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams before Orlando did win 3-1 on the road against Chicago. Then Orlando won 3-1 against Chicago before Orlando winning 1-0 against Chicago. Then it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams. So Chicago has not been able to solve Orlando City, at least in the last five head-to-head matchup. Well, that being said, Orlando this season, again, every time that they show promise on the road, they can't carry that when they play at home. There's something wrong with this team where they've been really struggling this season at home, and it's not like the fact that they're just struggling. They're struggling to score goals at home. On the road, they look very comfortable when it comes to scoring goals, but at home, it's been tough seeing how this team has played. And I'm pretty sure those Orlando City fans are kind of getting frustrated too, especially of their head coach Oscar Pereira, who I know he's been getting a lot of heat lately. I don't know if they're gonna probably fire him, considering he had an incredible season last year. You usually don't see a team just decide to fire a head coach after an incredible season unless something gone terribly wrong. And while yes, Orlando City is underachieving this season, they're still in the playoff race to a point where they're just gonna have to hope that as long as they keep in the playoff race, maybe that's good enough to keep Oscar Pereira. And not to mention, you just signed him to a new contract extension. It's not really a good look on the front office if you decide to fire a guy after you just signed a guy to a contract extension in the very same season. Then we go to the next match, which is the Philadelphia Union versus Charlotte FC. So the Union 4-8-6, whereas Charlotte is 8-5-6, and that the Union desperately need a win. I mean, this has been probably the roughest patch that Jim Kern side has gone in a really long time. Really, ever since when they started to become good near the end of the 2018 and in the 2019 season, that we have not seen the Union struggle this much throughout season, and that's even including when they were in the CONCACAF Champions League, where they weren't going through such a free fall as what we've seen with the Union right now. In terms of the all-time meeting, 2-2-1 in favor of the Union. The last meeting between both of these teams was a 0-0 draw, and then it was a 2-2 draw in the game at Bank of America Stadium as well. But the last time both of these teams played at Subaru Park, good news for the Union, they did win that one. 1-0 was the win against Charlotte before Charlotte absolutely demolished the Union by winning 4-0. But then the Union won 2-0 against Charlotte FC. Though you kind of had a sense that the table has turned because, Charlotte has been very impressive this season, and that they're definitely looking to trying to get another win, and especially kind of a grind out kind of resort against the Union. And who said that probably couldn't happen, because besides the fact that this Union team is giving up a lot of goals, they've also had problem in terms of scoring, doing this rough run. Well, I say they had trouble scoring, and yet they scored 3 goals in the last game. I think it's mostly due to the defensive problem that this team has had, and again, just after just these last 2 games that are just so crushing loss, it really is a huge test to this team, and really a huge test for Jim Curran to really rile his team up, because it's one thing to suffer one soul crushing loss in a week, but to suffer 2 in the last 2 weeks, as we've seen with this Union, response badly if they don't want this season to go south, and it is definitely going south very quickly. Now, moving on, speaking of another team that is struggling right now, and that, of course, is Minnesota United, though I kind of expected that the Loons were going to be struggling, because I knew that coming into this dreaded June window, this is when, yeah, a lot of these players are going to be out because of international duty, not to mention they also have injuries problem, and it's also kind of a full display the fact that this team is not deep as they should be. Now, the good news for Minnesota in this game is that they're playing at home, which, it's hard to believe I'm saying it's a good news when they're playing at home, because this season they definitely have been better at Allianz Field compared to previous season. I think they only lost once so far at Allianz Field, if I'm not mistaken. But that being said, they are playing against Austin FC, a team that, yeah, these last couple of games, it hasn't gone so well for them. Although in the last game, it looked like it was a very Los Verdes game where they somehow, some way, lucked their way to get all 3 points, but just fell short a little bit. And they're probably going to try to do the same thing in this game against Minnesota. But Minnesota does have an 8-5-5 record, while Austin have a 6-6-7 record. I believe this is going to be the first of 3 games that's starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. All-time meeting, 4 wins apiece for both of these teams. Last 5 head-to-head matchup. This was the season opener where Minnesota was able to win 2-1 on the road against Austin before Austin absolutely demolished Minnesota. This is one of the worst losses that Minnesota has suffered at Allianz Field by losing 4-1 in that game. Then it was a 2-1 home win that Austin had against Minnesota before Minnesota winning 2-1 against Austin, and then Austin winning 1-0 against Minnesota. So again, this is a game that you could maybe argue this could be a desperation derby too, with both of these teams desperately want to get a big win to get their season back on track, and we'll see whether or not if either of these teams can do so. I mean, ideally, I think for Minnesota, they really need this win, because again, I know, yes, they're losing a lot of players due to international duty and suffering through some injuries, but every team has to deal with that, and I think they just gotta tread water until when we get to the summer transfer window, because I really hope that the summer transfer window there's going to be reinforcement to this team. They have to get some reinforcement, especially on the defensive end that has just been absolutely horrendous in the last couple of games. Now, moving on, we got Nashville versus NYCFC. So Nashville they have definitely got a little bit of the new interim head coach boost, at least in the last couple of games where they have played a little bit better and has improved their record to 5-8-5, whereas they play against an NYCFC side that has kind of started to come back down to earth now that's suffering back-to-back losses with a 9-2-7 record. In terms of the all-time meeting, 2-1-1 in favor of Nashville, but the last four head-to-head matchup, the last matchup between both of these teams, NYCFC did get their first win against Nashville by winning 2-1 at home. Then it was a 2-0 home win that Nashville has against NYCFC. Then it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams, and then Nashville had a 3-1 win against NYCFC. So, yeah, overall, this is a matchup to see whether or not if Nashville can continue to improve. Well, the big problem for Nashville this season is that they have been very inconsistent at time. It feels like every time when they had a good victory, it's followed up by a bit of a dud. And also, once again, they are another team that have drawn a lot of games this season. But we'll see whether or not if they can do so against an NYCFC team that Nick Cushing side would want to kind of start to bounce back after it's been a bit of a coming down to period after they were probably the hottest team in the league for a while. And I think also, not to mention, not playing at Yankee Stadium maybe kind of plays the result of why they're kind of cooling off a little bit, because during that hot streak they play a lot of games at home at Yankee Stadium at Citi Field, and we know that NYCFC, when they play at a baseball stadium, they always get the full advantage because of the dimension. But now that they're not doing so and they're performing on the road, yeah, their road performance have definitely taken a hit because of that. But that being said, I am now actually just gonna switch sports manually, because why need to stop this video when we can just do this again? I'm getting a habit of just keep doing this without just switching the board. I probably should have just done this in my review that I did in the middle of the week, though I don't think that would be the case, because I have to change 4 boards and I basically have to erase this board and also the other board as well. But more or less, in the next matchup is a matchup we have never seen before. It's St. Louis versus Atlanta United. So this, of course, is the first ever meeting between both of these teams, as it is the case whenever St. Louis play against an Eastern Conference team, because they just came into the league last season. They barely play any team from the Eastern Conference. But coming into this matchup, I mean, this game you could also say it's a desperation derby, because man, it's been a rough season for St. Louis, and the last game just kind of a cherry on the top in terms of just a brutal season that they've been going through, with a 3-9-6 record, easily their worst loss at home in the last game, with a 3-0 loss at home against Colorado. Whereas for Atlanta United, they did get a very much needed win in that desperation derby against DC United with a 5-5-8 record. But now the question is, can they follow that with another win, especially against a St. Louis side that, like I said, this is a team that is struggling on both fronts of the period. This team cannot score right now. They have kept off the score sheet 3 straight games. And then on the defensive end, yeah, we saw what happened on Wednesday night against Colorado, where they just gifted two goals. That is something that we saw last season. That was St. Louis, the one that is being benefited. Boy, oh boy, divine intervention has come back to haunt St. Louis. That now St. Louis is almost like they're getting paid up for all those beneficial kind of back pass that they got last season, and now it's kind of the opposite. But all kidding aside, again, both of these teams desperately need a win, and that we'll see who, of course, will do so coming out of this game. Next one, we got Colorado versus Montreal. So believe it or not, this is a matchup we have not seen in a very long time. To show you how long it's been since both of these teams has played against each other. The last time both of these teams played each other was a 6-3 win that the Rapids had against Montreal. This was back in 2019. This was before the COVID pandemic exists. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of these East versus West matchup that we haven't seen in a long time. That is as long as this one, but both of these teams playing against each other for the first time in 5 years. The Rapids have an 8-4-7 record, whereas Montreal has a 4-7-7 record. All-time meeting 5-1-2 in favor of the Rapids. This is actually going to be the first of 2 games that start at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, which that usually tells you that RSL is also at home because they're the two only MLS team that play in the Mountain Time Zone. But in the last five head-to-head matchup, like I said, it's been so long since both of these teams have played each other that it feels like it's a lifetime ago when both of these teams back in 2019 played in one of the most thrilling MLS game we have ever seen in this league history with a 9-goal thriller with Colorado winning 6-3 against Montreal. But before that, it was a 2-1 Montreal win against the Rapids before the Rapids won 2-1 against Montreal. Then it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams, and then Montreal winning 1-0 against the Colorado Rapids on the road. Now, in terms of the balance of play, no doubt Colorado will be the favorites coming into this one. Montreal, they have played a little bit better, at least in the last couple of games, but they're still not winning games, and that they've been going through this tough stretch ever since they finished that game road stretch to begin the season. It's almost like after that 6 game road trip where they stay above water, that it feels like maybe things were going to be promising for a Laurent Courtois team, and yeah, it just hasn't really kind of been promising whatsoever. But that also is by design because, not to mention a lot of bad things that has gone on for Montreal off the field. And when we see a lot of distraction or some things that are negative off the field, it can definitely suits into to the on the field product, and that's kind of what we've seen with this Montreal team, a team that clearly is having problem in terms of keeping the ball out of the back of net and also not scoring enough goals to get wins. And facing against a Rapids team that definitely are going to be very confident after that big win that they had against St. Louis. Yeah, this could be one that the Rapids should get an easy win, but as I said before, in this league, there is no easy win, and the Rapids will still have to respect Montreal coming into this game. Now, moving on, we got RSL versus the LA Galaxy. So this is probably the biggest match of the week. And again, if there was one match that should be separated out of just so many matches that's going to happen in the same time, it's got to be this one because this is a game between two of the best team in the league, and I will not be surprised we might see a playoff series between both of these teams. And if that's the case, sign me up in terms of watching this in a playoff matchup because I have a feeling this could be very entertaining and it could be high scoring too because again both of these team are known to score goals, and both of these teams at times have also known to give up goals, especially what we saw in the last game where RSL basically forgot how to play defense against Sporting KC. But RSL still has the best record in the West with a 10-7-2 record, whereas the Galaxy have a 9-7-3 record. All-time meaning 24-15-20 in favor of the Galaxy. Last five head-to-head matchup, it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams before another 2-2 draw between both of these teams. Then the Galaxy won 3-2 on the road against RSL before it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and then it was RSL winning 1-0 against the Galaxy. So at least in the last three matchup, it's been pretty high scoring, and again, I will not be surprised it could be high scoring again because that's kind of how Galaxy game is, both at home and on the road. And RSL is a team that one of the best attacking team this season, and again a matchup that I really wish this was the only matchup in a week because it's a very marquee kind of matchup. And I also wish that this was national televised. Though that being said, as I mentioned before, Fox is probably not going to be national televising any MLS game for the next couple of weeks because they of course have to televise Copa America, and as long as that tournament is still going, yeah, Fox is basically not going to broadcast any MLS game, which I think that's a good thing because I think people are kind of tired of seeing Fox broadcasting games in MLS, and especially I've already heard people complain about their coverage of the Euros and Copa America. I'm kind of glad that MLS finally has that Apple TV deal right, and that we're past the period of what we've seen with Fox decided to cut the footage of an MLS game in favor of a college women's softball game because, of course, a college women's softball game is more important than an MLS game. Now, moving on, we got LAFC versus the San Jose Earthquakes, and I gotta say, this is probably the closest matchup that I really want to say congratulations to LAFC of getting an easy win, because on paper, this is a complete mismatch. I mean, the Quakes, they're to say that they're a bad team is an understatement. They're on point of almost equivalent to what we saw in 2018 being one of the worst team, not only in the Quakes history. Well, actually, that was the worst season in Quakes history, but one of the worst team in MLS history. They of course play against an LAFC team that is red hot right now. Even in the draw that they had against Austin, they still have a 10-4-4 record, and they're keeping heels with RSL in terms of the top spot in the West. This of course is the first of three games that start at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. All-time meeting 9-1 and 7 in favor of LAFC. Last five head-to-head matchup, it was the Quakes winning 3-1 against LAFC at Levi Stadium. Then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams before it was a 2-1 home win that LAFC had against the Quakes. But then LAFC lost 2-1 on the road against the Quakes and didn't do it again, losing 2-1 against the Quakes. There's just something about LAFC that have problems when they play against the Quakes. And again, this is why I said that as much as this is a mismatch, LAFC has had issue with the Quakes, and even with in some of their wins that they had, it hasn't been pretty wins, whatsoever. So do not be surprised. This could be a surprising result, and also do not be surprised of me just getting very frustrated about myself watching the Quakes potentially pull off an upset, and just kind of keep asking myself that where has this been for this team in the whole season, and even if they do pull off an upset win, they're one of those teams that, as I mentioned, some of these teams in the bottom of the Western Conference, like Sporting KC and San Jose, they're done in terms of playoffs. They're not coming back with the way that they're so far behind as we already passed the halfway point of the season. Now, moving on, we got the forgotten Cascadia derby between the Portland Timbers versus the Vancouver Whitecaps. So it could be a good forgotten Cascadia derby because both of these teams are pretty close to each other in the standings. The Timbers actually now climbing up to seventh position with a 6-6-7 record, while Vancouver is currently in sixth place with a 7-4-6 record. All-time meetings 17-8-12 in favor of the Timbers, and in the last five head-to-head matchup, the Whitecaps did win 3-2 against the Timbers before they did win on the road against the Timbers 3-2, but then the Timbers won 3-1 against Vancouver, and then Vancouver won 1-0 against Portland Timbers before it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. So recently in this forgotten Cascadia derby, Vancouver has kind of got the better of the Timbers. So again, this is a matchup that, unlike what I said about the LAFC versus San Jose Earthquakes matchup, where it's probably predictable, probably would say the home team is heavy favorites and probably is going to win this game. This one is hard to predict because, again, the Timbers, yes, they have played a little bit better in the last couple of weeks, but they also are still giving up a lot of goals and still have defensive issue. Whereas they play against a Whitecaps team that has been very inconsistent. They have shown a different type of Whitecaps team almost every single week. There's been times where Vanni Sartini Whitecaps team looked like one of the best team in the West, and then there's time where Vanni Sartini Whitecaps team looked like one of the worst team in the Western Conference. Inconsistency has been a problem for the Whitecaps lately, and we'll see which version will show up in this game against the Timbers. And then finally, last but not least, we got the Seattle Sounders versus FC Dallas. So this is an interesting matchup because it's between two teams that started to kind of have a bit of a rejuvenative period, at least in the last two games. For Seattle, they have a 5-7-7 record, and I believe they're just outside the playoff position right now. Whereas for Dallas, they're definitely getting big benefit for the new interim head coach boost. I mean, these last two games easily has been the best game that Dallas has played throughout the whole season, and they have a 5-5-8 record. All-time meaning 20-13-11 in favor of Seattle. Last five head-to-head matchup was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams before Seattle winning 1-0 against Dallas. Then Dallas win 3-1 against Seattle before Seattle winning 2-0 against Dallas, and then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. And it's also important to know that Lumen Field is basically a house of horror for FC Dallas. I mean, they have really got to win at Lumen Field, and that, of course, includes the playoffs as well. I mean, Dallas just hate facing against Cascadia team. Like, it feels like every time when they face against a Cascadia team, they know that they're probably going to lose to them because that's what happened, but we'll see whether or not if that might be true because again, this is not the same Seattle team that Dallas has faced all throughout the season. This is definitely one of the worst Seattle team that they have faced at Lumen Field. But I said the same thing about Minnesota of how they also have problems beating Seattle at Lumen Field, and yet to this day they still have not beat Seattle at Lumen Field in their club history, and we'll see whether or not if maybe that's going to be the same case where the narratives are the narrative and the, and the ownage is ownage, and that maybe Seattle will get another win against Dallas, as it's pretty much been the case throughout the last decade or so. But there we have it. That is pretty much it in terms of me reviewing all these games, or not reviewing, I'm sorry, but previewing all 14 of these games. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of these preview, and as always, let me know in the comments below your prediction for all 14 of these games. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.